Greetings ladies and mental gents, and welcome to my channel, where I like to make audio narrations of various stories from the internet. In this video, we will be focusing on a story from the subreddit HFY, called Food for Thought Part 5. The link to the original story is down below, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. A reminder to all UCH Marines, shore leave on worlds and stations under jurisdiction of allied species is subject to the terms and regulations set by the hosts. Remember that while socializing with the locals, you represent not only the corps, but the UCH and humanity as a whole. Marines are expected to abide by the local laws whenever possible and to familiarize yourself with the local customs and etiquette. If you are unsure of anything, it may be useful to remember the following guidelines. Sexual dimorphism is not a universal concept. There is no standard body language. Unless clearly told otherwise, that female does not wish to mate with you. You cannot take that alien in a fight. Maintain the sole possession of your own beer at all times. Do not pet the locals, no matter how cute or cuddly they may appear. Alex found himself in the same quiet halls that Recklow had walked, his heavy boots playing with a steady rhythm on the bone metal floor. What the fuck was wrong with me? His mind was a storm of unshaped fear. His chest was tight, his fingers ached. He had played the scene over and over again, his steps slowly quickening with each repetition. Settling into a quick boot camp jog, he had made a mistake. He'd fucked up. It's time to run it out, soldier. Even as he had jogged, Alex couldn't outrun what had happened. He had frozen up. How had he lost his nerve? He was a petty officer first class, Red Alpha. He was better than this. He was better than this. Double time, soldier. Move like your life has a purpose. 200 combat engagements, 3 major campaigns, 15 minor deployments, hop 2, 6 boarding actions, 5 decompression scenarios. I don't see you sweating, recruit. 1 abandoned ship, and you call that a run, private? 6 purple hearts. Good work, son, but try to keep your head down next time, huh? And 2 Void Nav Commendation Awards. You're a Merit of Fleet soldier. The Void Nav Marksmanship Ribbon, and of course his Fleet Cross. Olympus Mons was you. Damn fine work, soldier. Alex came to a stop, panting as hard with one hand on the wall as he caught his breath. The other clenched and unclenched as he tried to stop his shaking. He could smell the iron in the air, hot breath on his face, cold titanium against his back, pressure in his ears, the start of a scream. Sencha Alexander. He snapped back to where he was now, looking at the source of the voice. A Sabari male stood nearby, dressed in a long, colorful tunic decorated in a sharp geometric layers. There was something familiar about the plumage, and it took Alex a moment to remember. Ailey, right? The male nodded as offered a salute, with Alex returned. Yolthinli Siya Hashra. When Alex only gave him a look of confusion, Alia took a closer look and then ran his claws along the gold band of his translator, questioningly. The human blinked and touched his own face before groaning. No, I must have left it back in the den. Sorry, Isla. Isla nodded an understanding and scratched at his chin before making himself look more miserable as possible. Then pointing at Alex. Oh, yeah, I'm fine. Just out of breath. This place is a lot bigger than I expected. And with the time differences, I lost track of things. He explained, running his hand through his damp hair. He was thankful that his alien accepted the answer without further question, instead of gesturing his hand to invitation to join him. He gave a nod and fell into step beside the larger companion. The two walked in silence for a while until they apparently arrived wherever it was Ailey had been going before running into him. They had come to what looked like a cross between a park and a rec center. It was much warmer and humid there than in the rest of the ship, and Ailey seemed to perk up once the door closed behind them. Alien foliage grew from the alcoves on the walls that reminded Alex of a jungle swamp. This must be what their homeworld is like, he thought to himself, as his companion shed a long tunic and stretched, gesturing to welcome Alex inside proper. The two passed other Sabari, who were either wrestling, sparring, or simply exercising in some way, shape, or form. Alex had plenty of questions to ask, but with his own lack of a translator, he contented himself with trying to apply good old human logic to everything he saw. When Eileen came to a stop and shed his heavy tunic, the human offered to hold it to it while he sat down to watch. The Sabari offered a nod of thanks and joined a small group of others in what appeared to be a sparring ring. Watching the aliens practice gave the human time to finally observe and think of things over. The reptilian warriors had a very straightforward fighting style at first glance. Quick, precise blows and heavy emphasis on grappling. Attacks with claws, teeth, and tail seemed encouraged, and he considered how he could counter these charges and throws as he saw. He thought about the best way to avoid the razor claws and thick, tearing teeth. He also thought about Recklow. He had made a big mistake in letting himself think out loud like he had, and she would have had every right to rip him apart for the insult. And though she seemed content to have simply scared him senseless, he had no intention of letting this issue linger more than necessary. Besides, even if he hadn't been Recklow or any other Sabari, he never liked having bad blood existing between him and his comrades, especially those he bunked with. This left Alex with a fair list of things to do before he started his proper shift. Set up a hydroponics kit for fresh produce, speak with a Sabari medical team about their dietary needs and restrictions, try to smooth things over with Recklow, learn a bit of the Sabari language, memorize Sabari rank insignia, try and get a primer of do's and don'ts to avoid pissing anyone off. He turned his attention to the footy on the sparring once more and smiled. And maybe see if he can go a few rounds with these guys. Alex figured that eventually he'd end up in a confrontation somewhere, even if he tried his damnedest to avoid stepping on anyone's toes. When it did happen, he wanted to be able to at least hold his own before getting his ass handed to him sideways. When Eileen finished his sparring, Alex rose from his feet, where he'd been sitting, and walked over. "Hey Eileen, I was wondering if you could help me with some private practice. I figure you're more than tough enough, and that I'd like to be able to let loose a little without hurting you." The Sabari considered this a moment and then offered a toothy smile and a nod. Turning to his opponent and sharing a few words, the female warrior grunted something and hurried off as Eileen gestured for Alex to follow, leading the human to a secluded sandy ring tucked away in one of the corners. Eileen approached a tall rack and grabbed a pair of what looked like croc-skin braces. The thick guards strapped to the forearms and covered the back of the hands, curved forward slightly over the knuckles while leaving the fingers and claws exposed. As the Sabari geared up, Alex stretched and ran himself through a few testing jabs to warm up. Just as he was getting ready to square off with Eileen, the warrior from before returned with much smaller pads of varying lengths and sizes, towards which Eileen gestured. The human offered a nod of thanks to the stranger and looked the gear over. These had longer and wider curves on the handguards, and the leathery hide was more supple and better padded. Alex couldn't help but laugh as he started strapping a pair of his arms with the stranger's help. "Let me guess. Children's pads," he asked, watching how the strangers were strapping him up. Eileen gave him a toothy smile and nodded. "Ij Cesarish Alexander Dalha," he replied, gesturing about Alex's height as he spoke. The petty officer nodded thoroughly and took a slightly longer pair to strap on his shins, trying to emulate how he'd seen the strapping done. After a few fumbles, he managed to get the right enough for the stranger to be satisfied and step back into the standing ring to square off. The two shared a quick salute, then Alex fell into a boxer stance as Eileen lifted his arms to guard. "I'll try to get past your guard. You keep me back, yeah?" Eileen nodded, and the stranger gave a bark word. As Alex rushed in, the human was fast, striking quick and backing off every few jabs. He tested the larger alien's defenses and style with a practiced form and trained fighter. The Sabari warrior took the attacks well, shifting and moving to deflect the block of each attack, occasionally striking back with a backhand swipe of his own. The pair kept this up for a while before falling into a more relaxed pace. After Alex had vented most of his tension, "Hey, I know communication is a bit spotty, but I gotta ask, if someone calls me a whelp, are they calling me a child?" Alex asked during the break in the sparring. Eileen blinked and then shook his head. The alien thought for a moment before tapping his upper arm and saluting stiffly. "It's a rank then. Guessing it's really low." Nod. The human scratched his cheek, and then the guard, he thought for a moment. "How low?" Eileen waved Alex over and started drawing symbols in the sand. Alex watched for a moment until he saw that a few that he recognized. "That's the Dread Alpha rank right there." "Yes." And that's the one Snatcher was wearing. Beta? He asked, getting another nod. He looked at the ordering and then pointed down to the first one. This one is Whelp. No, Sabari indicated, pointing before an empty spot on the sand before it. So Whelps don't have a ranking patch then. Bottom of the pile as well. Fitting, I guess, since civilian personnel like cooks don't get ranks, even on warships like this. Eiley gave him a look, then pointed at Alex, and then to Dreadnought Alpha, Mark insistently. Yeah, well, but that's only because the shipmaster granted it to me as a courtesy. Recklow was right. I haven't earned it here yet. This elicited a faint snarl from Eiley, the stranger mentioning something that seemed to settle him down. Don't worry about Recklow, Eiley. I can handle her. I just want to avoid making things worse, you know, he explained as he straightened up, giving the Sabari a pat on the arm and a smile. By the way, who's your friend? Eiley smiled and stepped beside the stranger, made very clear the affectionate gesture. Alexander Yashtrausen du Zalishka Yesjura, she introduced. The female returned the affection and offered a slight bow, greeting to Alex. A pleasure to meet you, Zalisha. I'm going to guess that Eiley is your mate. Alex asked with a wide smile. The two nodded and nuzzled each other for a moment before sharing a few words in private. Alex shed himself of his guards, and Eiley did the same. There was a lot more that he wanted to talk to the aliens about, but he watched the couple talk and interact. He quietly excused himself and slipped away. He knew as well as any how things got on long deployments with no company. He was determined to avoid cockblocking his new friend when Eiley had his mate abroad with him. With nothing else to do, Alex made his way back to the den. Recklow was still asleep in her makeshift nest, and the lights were still out when he got there. As they retrieved the translator unit from where he had left it on his desk, the human took a moment to get another look at his roommate. Now that he wasn't panicking, she wasn't getting up to his face, the female looked no more frightening than any other of the shipmates. If anything, she was a bit less so. Snatcher was bigger and had a highly longer tail, so Recklow had broader hips and less sharp teeth. Without her uniform on, he could see the long scars that marked her body and what looked like patterns etched into the patches of her scales. Why the hell am I comparing them? He asked himself quietly, and then realized what he was doing. With a shake of his head, the human slipped back over to his side of the den and got to work setting up his hydroponics kit. The Sabari may be carnivorous, but he wanted fresh veggies and herbs to supplement his own diet. The last thing he wanted was to be stuck eating those Marines' MREs all the time. A few hours later, the lights brightened and the temperature rose with Recklow rising along with it. She uncurled herself from the bed of furs, stretching herself out from the arch of her back. Her tail curled, twisted, and a few times, and she gave a slow, wide yawn, popping her jaw a little before grinning it back into place. Her third eyelids slid open, and she spotted the human tinkering with what looked like a still at first glance. The whole unit was built over two long, olive-drab basins positioned side by side. The small fusion generator sat at the end of each and connected to a collection of boxy devices, pipes, and very pleasant set of lights. She stared at the lamps for a moment before shaking her head and climbing out and walking to the control panel to ready for a bath. Bonjour, Recklow. Atsuse Bodomi? She tilted her head and saw the human had turned her face, and a smile back at his face. I wish to speak with you, human. I would use the translator. She replied in a huff, slipping into the water. The human looked towards her area and then back at her before sending, Oh, bon, Domage. He made his way past her tub towards the side of the den. She gave him a warning growl, but he simply waved her off and grabbed the translator from where she had dropped it. With the golden device in hand, he walked over to her and held it forward. She eyed him with a mix of distrust and irritation, but reached out and took the headpiece, fitting it on and tapping the activator. Happy now? She growled, turning her back to continue her bath. Yes, actually, Alex replied, with a chipper tone. He turned to the hydroponic setup to continue his work, preparing the seeds that he had. I'm surprised you're still here after last night, she piped up after going long silence between them. He simply shrugged as he worked. We had a bit of an argument, not like we tried to kill each other. Sorry about what I said, by the way. She huffed and lowered herself into the water a little more, blowing bubbles through her snout. He confused her. First, he was a definition of confidence and curiosity. Then he turns into a blubbering coward, and now he was acting like she hadn't put him in his place. What are you doing? she finally asked vehemently. Hydroponics kit. You guys might eat a ton of meat and marrow, but I need vitamins and minerals from home. Got plenty of supplements, but fresh produce is always the better option. I just hope that the filters don't mess anything in the water that kills these little guys before they grow. You are a strange human, so I've been told. Hey, listen, he stood from his work and toweled off his hands before he turned to face her again. I'm heading out for breakfast. Do you want to join me? This time her confusion was genuine as she sat up. But I have already eaten. But you just slept for, 16 hours? Aren't you hungry? Sabari eat once every 5 days. Do you not? Alex's eyes went wide as he did the calculations. 66 hours in a Sabari day. 5 days meant 330 hours, divided by 24 hours in a standard Terran day. Holy shit, I'm going to have so much free time. End of Part 5. If you enjoyed this story and wish to support the author, the link is down below. If you would like to support this channel, there are numerous ways to do so. They will also be listed in the description down below. But the easiest way to help this channel is to share it, subscribe, and like. And, as always, I will see you all in the next video, and I hope that you have a good one. Cheers!